The Health Justice Initiative says the appointment of Dr. Nicholas Crisp as Acting Director General shows the shambolic nature that the Health Department finds itself in, adding that more pressure is being put on the new Acting DG. Crisp appointment was made earlier following the suspension of Sandile Buthelezi for the alleged role he played in the Digital Vibes scandal. Since the suspension of former Health Minister Dr. Zweli Mkhize, there have been numerous changes of personnel in key positions within the department. Founder and head of the Health Justice Initiative, Fatima Hassan, says the department needs stability, especially during a pandemic.
That information is correct, and we believe that it is and that it's reliable. It means that it's a department that is doing two things. In the middle of a pandemic, is losing a lot of key personnel and institutional memory because it's occupied with dealing with quite a significant corruption scandal which is hanging over the department. And secondly, it means that the person who's meant to be in charge of the national vaccine rollout program is now going to be taking up additional responsibilities and tasks. So we're really hoping that the minister will have an urgent press conference and take, questions from journalists and from the public and civil society to understand what all of this means. I mean, I think you've accurately sort of indicated that in our view, this is actually just shambolic. This is a department in the middle of a pandemic that has now lost a minister, that has had an acting minister, that has, had a new minister and a deputy minister installed, and now has a DG who's been suspended as well, all because of the Digital Vibe scandal.
The Special Investigating Unit has reiterated its stance on former Health Minister Dr. Zweli Mkhize regarding the Digital Vibes contract. Speaking to Newzroom Afrika, SIU head Advocate Matibi says they are confident of their investigation. Yesterday, the unit told Parliament that Mkhize approved 2 budget allocations for Digital Vibes worth over 130 million rand.
NPA, through their ability and their responsibility to decide on whether that evidence is conclusive to return the charge. So when we investigate, we do know our investigators are trained in terms of the criminal law elements. If the crime is corruption, remember there's a Prevention and Combating of Corrupt Activities Act that sets out all the elements of what corruption is. And our investigators are trained around that. And when we see the evidence pointing to all of those, we are satisfied that this evidence needs to be referred for consideration by the NPA so that they can decide whether to return a charge of corruption or any criminal offense. Hence the usage of the word maybe.
Okay. Right, we stay with that story. Advocate Matibi says the company was appointed irregularly as it didn't have the necessary experience to do the work.
As we looked at the procurement process, our investigators really went into detail in assessing the process and looking at the companies that were looked at and, of course, the competencies. Right? So our evidence indicates that at the time of the procurement process, the assessment indicates that Digital Vibe had only, I think, 1 year experience, whereas the other company, now I won't be exact now, and I don't want to mislead you and the public, but it had really several years of experience. So, and we looked at some of the competencies of the members of those companies, and it's really our view. It's really our view that the Digital Vibe was really not fitted in the circumstances, and that the process was irregular. And that is why we are at court now, amongst others, or the special tribunal that is, to declare that contract unlawful, irregular, and set it aside so that we can also recover the monies that have been paid.
Right, let's get reaction now from Dr. Aslam Dasu from the Progressive Health Forum, as well as health economist Professor Alex van der Kevan, joining us now to unpack the impact of corruption investigations currently undergoing at the Department of Health. To be a part of this conversation, you can send us your views tonight, 072-110-5584. Would you characterize the situation at the Health Department as a leadership crisis? And is this, of course, cause for concern for you in our rollout of the fight against the pandemic? Let's get your views tonight. Gentlemen, good evening, and thank you very much for your time and joining us tonight here on In Focus. There is, of course, a disciplinary inquiry ongoing currently at the Department of Health, which has got to do with the Digital Vibes saga. A number of referral letters for executive action have been sent to the President as well as to the Minister. As a result, the Minister had indicated that a number of senior officials at the department would possibly be going on suspension for a department that is already operating on skeleton staff. It's not an easy situation, but would you characterize it, Prof, as a leadership crisis that should make us as South Africans uneasy, particularly about the response to COVID-19?
Well, I think there's been a leadership crisis in the National Department of Health and the Ministry for a considerable period of time. I think we're seeing the final consequences of that. And I think it's important to note that it's not the Digital Vibes scandal that has caused this. The Digital Vibes scandal is an indication of a symptom of the leadership crisis. It's not possible for such a potentially corrupt contract to have been entered into without a substantial number of officials effectively colluding with a member of the executive. And these are all people who kind of fall under the control of the minister and members of the executive and would fall into what I would call top-down corruption, where what you have is essentially the capturing of all the strategic procurement positions within a particular department, and it allows you to essentially manipulate tenders. And that in itself means that the department is not actually focused on its core function, which is to protect South Africa's health status going forward. So I would say this leadership crisis has been ongoing, revealed by this, and potentially explains why we've had such a lackluster response to the COVID epidemic and other health crises.
Now, of course, we've seen the minister there, now former minister, Dr. Zweli Mkhize, leaving that post, the appointment now of the new minister and new deputy minister. All along, I mean, many would say there was an acting minister, but work continued to an extent uninterrupted. Potential impact of the latest changes now with Dr. Crisp going up to be now the acting DG there.
Sorry for me to respond. I would say that Dr. Nicholas Crisp has been sort of directly involved in the vaccine rollout to date, and I think has been very much in command of that process, difficult though it is, and he's also been subject to some criticism as well, but largely because he's had to kind of step into a very imperfect process. But I think that he has had a hands-on understanding of this, unlike some of the other people in the National Department, and I think therefore he's in a good position to immediately deploy teams to take forward the strategy without it collapsing. So I do not think that it will collapse, but I think that it's going to be very important now to constitute a competent leadership team in the National Department of Health. And I think that it has to be a competent leadership team, unlike what we've had before, and one in which there's a clear separation between the executive and the administration, because it's really the contamination of political appointments in the administrations of government that has resulted in the kind of crisis that we're seeing now and the collapse of functionality of many of our departments, and it has to stop. So I think that we've got to see now what the next steps will be. There's an emergency period now to deal with the crisis and the gaps in the National Department, but I think there's also an opportunity for a clean-up.
Dr. Dasu, your reaction to both those issues. One, the appointment of Dr. Nicholas Crisp as DG, but also a number of things that keep surfacing now, particularly when you hear or read at least the SIU affidavit on a number of things. For example, as Prof. Heever mentions, the political interference minister appearing in that particular affidavit as someone who influenced the appointment of Digital Vibes and the payments thereof. The DG, who is said to be on leave or suspended, we're not clearly sure at this point, saying when he came on, he took the appointment of that particular contract, Digital Vibes contract, to his office and was the one administrating that. What does that say, particularly when it comes to confidence in the department?
Good evening, Thabo. Well, it says that there is very little confidence right now in the department and in the superstructure in particular, and at a very critical time. I mean, look, this is the latest in a long history of a litany of unfortunate events that occur with the Department of Health. And, you know, there are a number of individuals that are placed in positions, whether it's political or within the public service itself, who have a lot to answer for. And the problem is that the system is designed to encourage this kind of behavior. And so the dissonance that you find between the National Department of Health and provinces is partly to blame for that. But another major proximate cause of this is, as Alex has averred, is the interference, and both from the governing party and then of course the lassitude of the political principles that are appointed in the department. This has been a department that has struggled for the last 15 years at least to create a coherent sense of a health system that is responsive to the needs of all South Africans. Instead, we have dabbled in policies that are far-fetched, and we have demonstrated a lackluster approach to taking health matters, you know, in hand, including the pandemic.
Now, Dr. Dasu, when we come back, I want you to respond in your confidence in the process. A report has been sitting on President Cyril Ramaphosa's desk now for over a month on this particular matter of Digital Vibes. The President has previously said that we must be confident that this Digital Vibes matter will not be swept under the carpet and will be dealt with decisively. Do you have confidence in this process? I'll give you an opportunity to answer that when we come back from the break. Welcome back with us tonight here on In Focus on Newzroom Afrika, channel 405. Dr. Aslam Dasu from the Progressive Health Forum and health economist, Professor Alex van der Kevan, joining us tonight to unpack the situation or the leadership conundrum at the Department of Health. Is it an easy task for the President to resolve? And do you have confidence in the process? Give us your views. 072-110-5584. You can tweet us at Newzroom405. Dr. Dasu, and that's the question, isn't it? Over a month now, the President has been sitting on this report. The SIU confirming to Parliament once again that they've concluded their investigation and put the report on the President's desk with referrals for executive action. Yet, we've seen none up until this point. Are you confident in the President handling this matter? And Prof. Alex van der Kevan says it's a very easy thing to resolve this, get leadership with integrity. Is that an easy thing to resolve?
I wish it were. It should be. And I think that the President does face a dilemma here. You know, so that's why he's probably taken as long as he has. When Minister Mkhize stepped aside, I remember saying that removes an important political personality from the political stage. And because of Minister Mkhize's seniority in the ANC, and I'm sure that there's been a lot of politics associated with that. But the crisp issue is that there has been corruption. Now, this is clear, and, you know, even with the political difficulties the President may be experiencing, what happened today was inevitable. And whether it's just a special leave or a stepping aside or a suspension, all it's doing really is keeping things in place. And it's not hard to understand why, because we are in the middle of a pandemic, and changing riders in the middle of a horse race is never easy. However, there's actually no choice here, that the vaccination program, which is the premier and most important intervention right now in managing the pandemic, which is the most important thing facing not only the health system but the country at large, that program is pretty much in place. And I expect that that would continue because most of it is run from the provinces anyway. But the complete shambles at the national department is not going to be resolved by putting in an acting DG and so on. It needs decisive intervention. It does need the ability of the president to be unfettered in finding the best people to put into that position, especially now when there's so much happening all at once. If you were to leave this and let it boil on as it seems to be doing without taking decisive action, not only will the vaccination program fail and the effects of the pandemic worsen, but our ability as a country to develop a comprehensive and a cohesive health system will be, permanently lost. Right now, we have a public system that's creaking. We have a private system that's poorly regulated. There are very clear indications, and I'm very pleased that the new Minister Patla, has actually commented on the health market inquiry and saying that we have to move forward with that. Well, I would urge him to move forward with alacrity on that and to get in a team in the national department that can get us beyond the pandemic in the first instance and then provide sufficient capacity to rebuild the public health system, which has been, neglected for so long.
Yeah. Prof. Heever, when you watch these disturbing developments around the DG, news reports indicating that there'll be more, actually. Even the deputy DG might be facing suspension and maybe other senior officials. In fact, that's what even the minister indicated in one of his interviews, that there is a possibility of even more suspensions. But, of course, it's a function of investigations and outcomes, and therefore dealing with corruption is what needs to happen. But when you look at the situation currently underway, does it inspire confidence in you?
Well, I think there are a number of concerns I'd have with where we're sitting with investigations at the moment. If you had a look at the overall picture, the SIU itself reports to the President as a member of the executive. And to have a member of the executive directly involved in investigations is already a problem. The question is really why our investigative structures are not independent and why they can't be trusted. And I think that at the moment, within the current crisis within government, that direct relationship between the President and the SIU might be a necessary feature of government at the moment to clean things up. But it's not necessarily dealing with the problem that we've got the hawks that have been dysfunctional, underfunded, and can't be relied upon to perform these kinds of investigations. And the subsequent prosecutions and the investigations for them can't be completed effectively, so the prosecutions can't happen efficiently. So this is wrong, just as a process. And the mere fact that there's a delay at this point raises questions about whether or not a political decision is being made as opposed to one about due process and the law. We need independent structures to expeditiously take action where corruption is involved, and there must be no political decision-making in that. It must just happen. And unfortunately, at this point, the fact that the state can't do that is a clear problem, and we need that part cleared up. That's distinct from the issue of the dysfunctionality within the National Department of Health, which has been there for a long time, probably because this conduct is there. And the mere fact that such a large group of people may have to be removed from the department tells you how many people have to be involved for a corrupt act like this to happen. So this, I would have been expecting, the moment you see a corrupt act like this, you know that everybody from the CFO, the DG, acting, anybody who was in a senior office-bearing position around this decision are implicated, including the tender process itself. So the issue is you're actually requiring such a large number of people to participate in this that it talks to the fact that you've got an entire department who's rigged for this kind of thing to happen. And we should be really, really worried about what this implies in all departments, including provinces and municipalities, because this is why we overnight saw a raid on the coffers through the PPE procurement, and it's not exclusive to that. Yeah. So I think this is a systemic problem. And this national minister has also been involved in wanting to put up national health insurance, in which he would be appointing everybody in the kitchen sink. This is a real problem, and it needs to be solved. And it also goes to how the investigative structures operate. All of this is wrong at the moment. So even if we're getting something right, the structure is definitely wrong.
As we worry about what this implies for the other departments in other provinces, but also for the NHI program, what does this read like, particularly to South Africans, as far as their confidence, for example, in the Department of Health, with currently the nation facing vaccine hesitancy? I mean, do the people then believe anything that comes out of that department?
Well, I think that messaging is going to have to come from all bodies that can be respected, and not just government alone. And it's a wider responsibility. And I think quite a lot of people are taking up that responsibility as well. But I think that at this point in time, what government has to do is to rebuild trust through action, because nobody's going to believe words at this point. Somebody's got to actually do something that shows that they're actually interested in the public and not interested in some patronage decision or theft. So I think that we really do need a confidence-restoring process, and it's got to be more than talk.
Dr. Dasu, I mean, one would say at least in the last 18 months or 18 months ago, the former Minister of Health was quite gung-ho about the NHI, saying it will go ahead whether people wanted or not. And at some point, of course, the debate is around this one kitty where all the resources are going to be thrown in, and create another body to look at that, to look over, have oversight over that kitty. And people have been saying, well, looking at how state-owned enterprises have been handled, that is a recipe for disaster. Surely this handling of the Digital Vibes contract is not adding any confidence towards that process.
Certainly not. And look, I mean, I think the entire proposition around NHI and any other grandiose plans that were in place have been decidedly upended through the pandemic. And I really want to stress this point. This pandemic has changed the game. And you know, just to even get the ministry to talk about the recommendations of the health market inquiry has been one of those upendings, because they were not prepared to do that. And now they are. And so I think the new minister, and he has a deputy now, probably, will be able to get a handle on things if, as Professor van Heever says, there is a concerted confidence-building process initiated by the presidency in this case, given the importance of this department. And look, I mean, I'm deeply concerned about actually the state of the national population right now in the grip of this pandemic. All of these matters feed into hesitancy around getting vaccinated. And getting vaccinated right now is our number one priority. So we make a rod for our own back when we allow things like this not only to happen, but then to react to them in an undecisive manner. So clearly there's room now to move. The DG's suspension or taking leave or whatever they want to call it must become a decisive matter. There should be no acting positions. There's sufficient talent in the country, within the government and outside of it, to replace these people and to fill posts that have been empty for too long, because the overarching concern right now, as you put it, must be for the well-being of the country. Once we are through the emergency phase of the pandemic, whenever that is, the plans on long-term, the long-term vision for restructuring the health system must start in earnest. But right now, we have a priority. What's happening in the Department of Health is detracting from all the attention that is needed to see this through.
Dr. Aslam Dasu from the Progressive Health Forum. Appreciate your time, and health economist Dr. Alex van der Heever there for joining us tonight here on In Focus.